Well, hello there, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're safe and well. In this video, I'm going to be investigating what's the best caliber for a Sub-12 air rifle. So let's get on with it then. Roll the titles. Now, if you've been involved with air rifles for any length of time, you probably realise the age-old debate is what's the best calibre for a Sub-12 air rifle, .177 or .22. Now I know 177 and 22 are not the only available calibers. We've also got 20 and 25, but in this video I'm going to discount them from the off really because of lack of choice of rifles and pellets, and they tend to be a bit more expensive. So we're going to go in the main and talk about the main calibers here, the calibers that you can guarantee if you go into a gun shop you'll be able to buy 177 and 22 pellets, not so much 20 and 25. So we'll clear that up straight away. Now I've read all the arguments online and listened to the discussions, and to me it seems to come down to two particular things. People say 177 has got a flatter trajectory, so therefore 177 pellets are the best pellets for target shooting, whereas 22 has got a loopier trajectory. And we're going to be looking at that and seeing whether that's the case and how much of a difference there actually is. And secondly, that the 22 pellet carries a lot more energy, and therefore 22 is better for hunting because it's more humane on the prey if you hit your prey with a higher energy projectile. So we'll be looking at that as well. So the format for this video then is I'm going to be testing 4 pellets, 2 in 177 caliber and 2 in 22 caliber. First off, I'm going to be measuring the muzzle velocities for 2 rifles. I'll be using the my AirArms S400 for the 177 pellets and my BSA Ultra CLX for the 22 pellets. So I'll be measuring the muzzle velocity and then plotting them in a ballistic calculator to compare the trajectory of the pellet for each of those, and looking at the data that the ballistic calculator turns up for that. And then secondly, I'll be making some ballistic gel and then testing the pellets for penetration in the ballistic gel and energy retention down the range to see how they fare compared to each other in that scenario. And then finally at the end we'll see if we can make some conclusions, and I'll let you decide. So let's get on with it then. Now there are clearly a lot of different weights of pellets in both calibers that I could use for this test, but I decided to go for what I consider is probably the most common. So in 177 we're starting off with the lighter pellet, the 8.44 grain JSB Exact, and then for the heavier 177 pellet we're using the Exact Diablo Heavy, which is 10.34 grain. And then on the 22 pellets I'm using both H&N pellets, and we're starting for the lighter pellet, the Barracuda 15.89 grain, because the 15 grain 22 pellets I think is fairly common. And then moving up to the heavier one, we're moving up to the Barracuda 18, which is 18.13 grain. So they're the 4 pellets that I'm using in this test. So here I've got the rifle set up. It's the 22 BSA Ultra CLX to do the 22 pellet testing. I'm using 2 pellets for this, with what I consider sort of standard weight 2-2 pellets that most shooters would use. As you can see, I've got the Nate Crony on the front of the rifle directed into my backstop box, and I'll be putting 10 shots through of each of the pellets to get the data that I need to go in the ballistic calculator so that we can compare the suggested pellet trajectories. So let's get started with the Barracuda 15s then. So now I've reset everything and we'll be shooting the Barracuda 18s, 10 shots from the magazine through the Nate Crony. So this is a setup for the 177 velocity test. You see I'm using the AirArms S400, again with the Nate Crony fitted onto the moderator, and I'll be using JSB Exact pellets, the 8 grain pellets and the heavy 10 grain pellets. Ten shots again then. Now for the heavy 10.34s. That's the muzzle velocity data collected then. Let's have a look at the results. Here are the results for the average muzzle velocity for each of the pellets then. The 8 grain pellet, 760 feet a second at 10.82 foot-pounds. The 10 grain pellet, 705 feet per second at 11.43 foot-pounds. The 15 grain pellet, 561 feet per second at 11.11 foot-pounds. And the 18 grain pellet at 539 feet per second at 11.72 foot-pound. So I've plotted all of the figures into Chairgun Pro, which is ballistics, is an old ballistics calculator. It's not used anymore, but the reason I've used this one is because it allows me to plot the 4 pellets on top of each other. So here you can see we've got the 8 grain pellet in red, we've got the 10 grain in green, the 15 grain in blue and the 18 grain in purple. You'll notice that I've set the zero range to each at 25 yards, and I've also set the scope height or the sight height the same so that the start point lines up. So you'll notice immediately that the 177, the red and the green, yeah, it is flatter trajectory. You'll notice with the 2-2 that the trajectory rises quite rapidly at the 25 yard zero before it starts falling again. And you'll see that the 2 pellets, the 177 and the 2-2, are pretty similar to each other. Also note here as well that it's only when we get out to about 35 yards that the trajectories drop away a lot. So up until, I mean, if you're shooting sort of 20 to 30 yards, which would be the normal sort of ranges for, I guess, for plinking, and certainly 25 yards to 25 meters for target shooting, not really any significant differences, to be honest. So you know, the fact of people saying, oh, you know, 177 for target shooting rather than 2-2. At a set target zero range, there's not really, looking at this, too much to distinguish the two. I mean, obviously you notice that it does drop off quite quickly once you get out to the longer ranges. So while I was in Chairgun, I was able to extract the data to compare the changes in velocity, the changes in energy as the pellets travel a further distance. And you can see these here in this table. I've collated these in 10-yard intervals from 10 yards up to 50 yards for each of the pellet. So for example, at 10 yards here, we've got our point of impact in millimeters, the muzzle velocity, the percentage drop. So here, for example, after 10 yards, we've lost 6% of the velocity. Velocity is only now 94% of its original value. We can see the energy in foot-pounds at that particular range and the percentage of energy loss. So at 10 yards, the 177 8.44 grain pellet is already down to 89% of the energy it had when it left the muzzle. So looking at these then, what's particularly interesting, I think, is, you know, we already know, looking at the graph, the trajectory curves, that there's a big drop off as we get further out. And what I'm more interested in now, really looking at this table, is the loss of energy as we go further. So you can see, look, the 8 grain pellet is losing energy quite quickly. The other 3 pellets are all very similar, and if we move these down, you can see that the 10 grain is really only lagging behind by about 1%. We get down here and the 10 grain is actually the same as the 18 at 40 yards, and then right at the bottom here, so we can see that, you know, we've lost a fair bit off of the 8 grain pellet, but the 10 grain pellet in 177 is keeping tabs with both of the 2.2 pellets in the amount of energy retention. And when we actually look at the amount of energy at the end here, it's not that far off of the 18 grain. The 15 grain is the one that's holding the most energy. There's really not that much difference between those when you think about it, which is quite interesting when you look at it from that point of view. So it'll be interesting to see how that correlates to the results from shooting in the ballistic gel. While we're in the ballistics calculator, let's take a look at the concept of point blank range. Now, the definition of point blank range you can see here. Point blank range is any distance over which a rifle can hit a target without the need to elevate the barrel to compensate for pellet drop. So basically what we're looking at is the minimum range and the maximum range within which we can use our crosshairs to hit a certain size of target. So let's go back to chair gun ballistic calculator to have a look and see how that works in practice. So we're back in chair gun and we're looking at the representation of the trajectory of the 8.44 grain pellet 177 caliber. You can see here I've set the kill zone to 1 inch or 25 millimeters, and then this is shown up on the graph as between these 2 purple lines, this shaded area. So you can see here that if we aim our crosshairs at our target anywhere between 10 yards and just over 40 yards, the pellet should strike within that 1 inch area. So say for example that we decide that you know, a 1 inch kill zone is a suitable target area if we were hunting rabbits for a rabbit's head. We know that if we were aiming at our rabbit's head, and as long as the rabbit was within 10 to 40 yards, we would hit our pellet within that 1 inch area. That's the point blank range. So you can see here that the 0 is at the top to get the fullest extent of the point blank range, and the 0 range here is going to work out at 36 yards, and down the bottom here it tells us the point blank range is 9.9 to 40.5 yards. So let's have a quick look at the representations for the other pellets then. So we've got the 10 grain pellet, you can see just fits in the top here, 35 yards. Move on to the 15 grain pellet, the 0 range is moving forward, in this case 28 yards. And last but not least, we are back here at the 18 grain pellet. So let's put all those results into a table just so that we can see them in an easy comparison. So this table collates all the information from the 4 pellets for the 0 range in order to get the widest range of point blank range. So you can see here we've got the 0 range, minimum range, maximum range. All these figures are in yards. And you can see that from the basis of what is the optimum situation, the lighter pellet actually gives you more scope for hitting something within your point blank range. You've got a much broader point blank range with a lighter pellet in 177 than you have with a heavier pellet in 22. So that might be something that you want to consider when you're choosing a hunting pellet. So far then we've looked at the figures and seen the theoretical measurements for the energy transfer at point of impact, and now's time to test it out in practice. Now, in order to do that, I needed to make some ballistic gel, and did my research, and I decided to use the mixture that the FBI use, which is a 10% by weight mix of 250 bloom gelatin. So that's 10% gelatin and 90% water. Now, I couldn't get any 250 bloom gelatin. The best that I could get at short notice was 240 bloom. But all the bloom denotes is how dense the gelatin is. So 240 compared to 250, from what I've read, is fairly insignificant, so should do the job. So basically it was a case of mixing up the gelatin with hot water, creating some moulds. So I poured the gelatin mix into 4 little cardboard moulds lined with cling film that I'd made, and then let it cool down and set and stick it in the fridge. I've got one of the blocks here that I used, and it's surprisingly firm stuff actually. You know, you think of jelly, you know, party jelly, strawberry flavoured jelly and stuff like that, which falls to bits when you put a spoon in it, but this is actually quite tough. So I made these little blocks. From the initial calculations, I was expecting one of these blocks to actually be able to stop a pellet at 35 yards, but we'll see what happened in reality. So I've got 4 blocks of this ballistic gel, and I'm going to use 1 block for each pellet of the 4 pellet sizes, and it stayed in the fridge, so it's nice and cold, because apparently the gel needs to be at around 4 degrees, so it's probably near enough that. But yeah, that's what we're going to be shooting. So hopefully there'll be enough there, long enough to resist the penetration of each of the pellets at this distance. Okay then, 8.44 grain 177 pellet in the ballistic gel. Right, now it's time for the 10 grain 177 pellet. Okay. As you can see on here, whereas the 177 pellet sort of hit the wood, didn't really penetrate, this 10 grain pellet has a lot more energy and has completely embedded itself in the wooden stop at the back. Right, we switch to the 2.2 calibre now. So first it's the 15 grain. Nearly missed the block. Right, final pellet at 35 yards then, the 18 grain. Well, as you've seen, penetration is a little bit greater than expected through this gel. So we're doubling up on the gel now. We're going to shoot them again, see if we can actually trap the pellets inside 2 lengths of gel next to each other. So we'll see how we get on. Well, that sounded like it went through to the wood at the back again as well. 177 caliber, 10 point whatever grain it was again, and, double gel. Back to the 2.2 then with the 15 grain pellet. Down to the last shot then, the 2.2 Barracuda 18 grain pellet. For the 2 lots of gel then, we've got the 177 pellets, the 0.8, the 8 grain and the 10 grain in the bottom gel, and the 2.2 pellets, the 15 and the 18 grain in the top. And as you can see, they've gone through both areas of the gel. The 10 grain has actually bounced off the wood at the back and flipped and come back on itself. But if you look at the indents, you can see that they weren't strong enough to actually penetrate and stick in the wood at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do another couple of shots. I'm going to just try and put 3 bits of gel together. I'll fish these 2.2 pellets out at the end there because they're easier to get out. Put 3 lots of gel through, and then I'll just try the 8 grain pellet and the 15 grain pellet in 3 lots and see what sort of distance we get for those. Right, so this is the 15 grain 2.2 pellet then with 3 blocks of gel. This is the results of 3 blocks then, and if I move down here you can see that the 15 grain 2.2 pellet has just managed to get through the 2nd block and just start on the 3rd block, and it stopped there. Right, I think I just said it was the 8 grain. I was going to switch to 177, but while I had the 2.2 out, I thought I'd push my luck and I'll try the 18 grain again. So this is a 2.2 caliber 18 grain pellet. Right, so I just shot a 2.2 caliber 18 grain pellet, and I didn't switch the range camera on, so I missed the shot into the gel. But you can see the pellet here if I come down, and you can see how much further the 18 grain has gone. There's the 15 grain, and there's the 18 grain. It's gone quite a bit further. If I put the ruler in, I think we said that the 15 was 195, so you can see that the 18 grain is about 245. So it's gone 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 centimeters more. Yeah, about 5 centimeters more. That's 2 inches more penetration than you know, for the 18 grain than the 15 grain. That's how much extra energy. So let's see how we get on. See if I can do the 2 177 caliber pellets again. See what results we get for those. Been losing track of the shooting because I've been switching on some cameras and not the others and losing track. So these are the last shots then. Just going to check my point of aim for the 10 grain 177 pellets and try shooting them again. And that's checked, ready to take my shot. Well, hit the gel anyway. Our final 3-pack shot then, which is the 10 grain 177 caliber pellet. You can see it clearly in there. It's gone in a little further than the 18 grain.
So just to, I can hold this steady then, just to go over again, got the 15 grain 2.2, 18 grain 2.2, 8 grain 177 and the 10 grain 177. And if we measure that, see how far that's gone, put that on the end here, and we probably got 252 millimeters for the 10 grain. So there you go, we actually got somewhere in the end with the gel. Let's have a closer look at this gel block then, rotate it over. You can see that the 4 pellets there. We come over to this side, you can see them a bit better, penetration. And then you can see here, look, that the 15 grain has just about gone into that third block, whereas the 8 grain is neatly inside. But yeah, it's quite interesting results. 2.2 and the 177 very similar. We'll have to refer back to the power chart to see what the energy is at that range, to see if that correlates with what we found with the gel.
So let's take a look at that final gel block and the penetration distances of the different pellets and compare that to the theoretical results produced by the Ballistic Calculator. So if you look at this slide, you can see on the left the picture, and I marked the different pellet weights, and I've put the energy calculations that the Ballistic Calculator suggested at 35 yards. So you can see here that the 15.89 grain pellet is slightly less penetration compared to the 8.44, when it should have been a lot greater, because it was still retaining 9.4 foot-pound, 74% of its energy, compared to 7 foot-pound, just over 7 foot-pound, and with the 8.4 at 66% energy. So that's a bit strange there. I would have expected the 15.89 to go to move a bit further forward. The other 2 pellets, 10.34 and the 18.13, that actually sort of bears the information on the table there. If you look, the 10.34, 8.34 foot-pound compared to 8.56 foot-pound, and very, very similar percentage energy. The only explanation I can give for the further penetration is the 10.4, is just that it's a smaller diameter, so it found it easier to sort of penetrate. But to be honest, not a lot of difference between those two, which is quite interesting, considering the difference in trajectory at longer distances. This seems to suggest that that perhaps you'll be better using a heavier 177 pellet if you want accuracy when hunting at distance, compared to a 2.2 pellet, but I'll leave that for you to think about and determine. So, given what I've discovered then during these tests, what conclusions can I draw? And I think there's 3 sort of main conclusions that I've written out on this slide, which I'll stick up now. So it's important to say that this is with respect to sub-12 foot-pound air rifles. Obviously, an FAC air rifle, you're going to find completely different results. But the first one, I've said here, at normal paper target ranges, that's 20 to 30 yards, there's a nominal difference in trajectory between pellet calibers. Point 2, 177 caliber pellets have a broader point-blank range compared to .22 caliber pellets. And finally, number 3, in practice, heavier .177 caliber pellets appear to retain a similar impact energy to .22 caliber pellets. Now, I must add a rider on this. As I said before, look, part of the reason that I do these tests and that is to actually test the claims that that other people make online and are perpetuated by further people that read them and believe exactly what they're being told without testing it for yourself. So, you know, my disclaimer again, these are my results. Don't take my word for these. Test these things for yourself and work out what works in your rifle and works for your pellets for yourself, and find out what works for you. Never take what you're told as gospel. Always test it and find out for yourself. Enough said. Well, that's the end of another video. Thanks very much for joining me. If you've got this far, I hope you found that interesting and a good watch. Some quite surprising results, I think. But as I've said, don't forget, do your own testing, find things out for yourself. If you've enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up and you know, share the video and subscribe if you haven't already. It's totally free, doesn't cost you anything, and it does help out the channel more than you can imagine. So hopefully see you on the next one. Until then, from me, bye for now.